Thousands of Afghans are being relocated to the UK as part of a secret £850 million scheme set up after a personal data leak affecting those who supported British forces. However, concerns have been raised after Taliban sources claim they were aware of the government's actions in attempting to cover up the leak and are seeking out those Britain has helped, raising questions about how safe these asylum seekers and British people around them are. A dataset containing the personal information of nearly 19,000 people who applied for the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy was released in error in February 2022 by a defence official. The breach resulted in the creation of a secret Afghan relocation scheme, the Afghanistan Response Route, in April 2024. GBNews can now report the leak after an unprecedented super injunction was lifted by judges at the High Court. Speaking in the Commons, Defence Secretary John Healey said the relocation has cost the taxpayer £400 million and called the leak a serious departmental error. The Ministry of Defence only became aware of the breach over a year after the release, when excerpts of the dataset were anonymously posted onto a Facebook group in August 2023. Details on the dataset include the names and contact details of the ARAP applicants and names of their family members. ARAP was responsible for relocating Afghan nationals who had worked for the UK or with the UK government and were therefore at risk of reprisals once the Taliban returned to power in Kabul in 2021. Between 80,000 and 100,000 people, including the estimated number of family members of the ARAP applicants, were affected by the breach and could be at risk of harassment, torture or death if the Taliban obtained their data, judges said in June 2024. However, an independent review commissioned by the government in January 2025 concluded last month that the dataset is unlikely to significantly shift Taliban understanding of individuals who may be of interest to them. Around 4,500 people, made up of 900 ARAP applicants and approximately 3,600 family members, have been brought to the UK or are in transit so far through the Afghanistan response route. A further estimated 600 people and their relatives are expected to be relocated before the scheme closes. A super injunction was made at the High Court in September 2023 to reduce the risk of alerting the Taliban to the existence of the data, with the decision to apply for an order made by then Conservative Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. The Information Commissioner's Office and Metropolitan Police were also informed. The super injunction, lifted on Tuesday, is thought to be the longest-lasting order of its kind, and the first time the government has sought such a restrictive measure against the media. At multiple hearings, lawyers for the MOD said in written submissions that there was a very real risk that people who would otherwise live will die if the Taliban gained access to the data. However, serious concerns were raised about the impact of keeping the public in the dark. Mr. Justice Chamberlain, who made the decision to end the injunction, warned that the secrecy may have actually put some Afghans at greater risk during their relocation to the UK, and that the lack of transparency could have made the situation worse for those left behind. The judge added that by keeping the scheme hidden, the government may have unintentionally added more value to the leaked list in the eyes of the Taliban, alerting them to who was being flown to safety. Now, Taliban figures claim to have had the list all along, potentially rendering secrecy pointless. A senior Taliban official told The Telegraph, "We got the list from the internet during the very first days when it was leaked. A special unit has been launched to find them and make sure they do not work with Britain. We've been calling and visiting their family members to track them down. Senior figures in the establishment in Kandahar are pressuring officials in Kabul to find them. They believe these individuals are still working with the British and say the problem must be dealt with." Another Taliban official said from Kabul, "The border forces have had the list for the past few months and have had orders not to let anyone leave. These people are seen as traitors, and the plan has been to find as many of them as possible. Whoever leaked that file is actually helping us. There may be a general amnesty in place, but spies cannot escape justice."
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney? Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Director of the Afghan Human Rights Foundation, Mohammed Asif, joined Ben Leo and Bev Turner on GBNews to discuss the government's actions.
Mohammed, very good morning. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased we've got an Afghan voice on this particular issue, because explain it to us as you see it from your perspective, why the taxpayer money needed to be spent on this.
Thank you. Good morning. Because Britain was in Afghanistan and they abandoned Afghanistan and left Afghanistan to the Taliban, a brutal regime in a brutal group. If you did not abandon, I'm an anti-war campaigner, basically. I campaign against the war. And I was actively campaigning that, Afghanistan should not be abandoned in that manner, that overnight you leave and throw the entire nation in the sea. And when the Afghans arrive here, and then you leak their details, there's another scandal, and this is really embarrassing, and this is not the fault of Afghans who's supposed to be in Britain, because Britain went to Afghanistan and destabilized Afghanistan and handed over to the Taliban.
Yeah. So, Mohammed, before the data leak, there were thousands of interpreters and family members who they'd argue would or should be in Britain because we owe them loyalty. Why weren't they in Britain? What was the obstacle? Who was campaigning against them coming?
I mean, maybe you have read the report. There was a particular from a man from a particular special force, who allegedly committed war crimes in Afghanistan. One single person refused 1,585 cases at the MOD because that particular person at the MOD was scared that the interpreters and those who witnessed the alleged war crimes in Afghanistan, they may be used as witnesses in the UK, and that one particular person, refused, nearly 1,600 applicants who were supposed to be in Britain, and that's also investigated by the MOD right now, or there is some sort of inquiry going on in the MOD. And the Afghans, if you stand against the barbarian regime in Afghanistan, the Taliban, who was, I literally say, re-empowered by Britain and America, this time even, left with billions of weapons. Yeah. And the very Afghans who stood with the British forces, military forces, interpreters, and other people who work. I literally had an email 3 days ago from a lady, who indirectly worked with Britain, and she was an activist for women's rights, and she's begging for her life, saying that my life is at risk from the Taliban, and she's abandoned by Britain.
And where are America in all of this, Mohammed? Because, of course, we, the Brits, only abandoned Afghanistan because Biden had made the decision to do so. Are America also taking thousands of Afghanis under the same sense of ethical duty?
I mean, America took more than, Britain. But again, you have a president in America right now, who are trying to deport Afghans, who stood with America. I wrote a letter after 9/11 in 2001 to Tony Blair. And I said, what sort of regime we will have in Afghanistan after the Taliban, their first government was about to be removed. And I received a reply from Tony Blair. This time we will bring, democracy, human rights, women's rights. Yes, fair enough. There were schools, education in the 20 years of occupation in Afghanistan, but there were miseries, for Afghans. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans were killed because some of the Afghans choose to stand with the Western countries in their occupation. And when the very same Afghans arrive here, we are told to go back, you don't belong here. And yeah. The bulk lies with the responsibility of day-to-day government in Downing Street, because the Tories headed for, it started in 2022, And then people found out in 2023 when the labor came, they even, put more ceiling on it so no one knows about it. And now when people find about it, they're crying. It's, I want Keir Starmer to apologize on Wednesday when he stand in Parliament, and he should apologize to the Afghans, the way the Afghans were betrayed by Britain and America and NATO, and the way the Afghans were led. Look, my daughters, my sisters, the Afghan woman, imagine yourself, you might have daughters, you might have family, your sisters, not allowed to go to school, not allowed to go to work, not allowed to go to outside. And this is all because thanks to the British and American and NATO occupation. Why do you have to hand over Afghanistan to the Taliban?
So, sorry to interject there. I mean, you say that's down to the British and American occupation. I mean, that was the situation in Afghanistan when the Taliban ruled before the invasion of Afghanistan. So if you want to be technical about it, the country's just gone back to how it was before Britain and the US got involved, right?
Yes, I mean, even previously when the Taliban were in power, there was some sort of education, but this is worse. You cannot have good Taliban and the bad Taliban. It got worse, especially for women, especially for people who speak, against the Taliban, especially, people who promote women's rights and democracy in education. And this is worse right now. Imagine if I have a haircut like yours, I will get punished for it. Imagine if I shaved, like you, the way you shave, the way you wear, tie and suit, I will get punished for it in Afghanistan. And this is, we were calling from the very start that this is going to be a failed war in Afghanistan. This is, the diplomacy is going to work in Afghanistan. We were told that we were the sympathizers of the Taliban, and we were proven to be right, that the policies of British and American did not work. And they abandoned. How do you run away 3 o'clock in the morning? The Americans did not even tell the Afghan counterpart or their regime or puppet regime in Afghanistan that we're leaving. The Afghan government only found out when people started looting Bagram Air Base, and then the government realized that the Americans have left the Bagram military base, the biggest military base in Afghanistan. This shows how disregard for the Afghan people, for the Afghan women, the people who stood with Britain and America, and this is where we are now.
It's such a complicated situation. And this is such a big question with a very short time to answer it, Mohammed. What is the best hope now for Afghanistan to be liberated from the Taliban?
I mean, I have asked my First Minister, John Sweeney. I live in Scotland. He's going to write a letter to Keir Starmer. I doubt it. He will do very little about it. That we have to put pressure on the Taliban, especially for women. My sister, my daughters. I have many relatives in Afghanistan who are teachers, female teachers. My niece was a teacher, and she was told to go home and get married. And we want Keir Starmer at least to raise his voice and say what is happening in Afghanistan. It's not in our name. After all, you have spent billions in Afghanistan. I have been to the funeral of Scottish soldiers who were fighting in Afghanistan. I know their families. What do you say to the families?
Is that Britain's problem, or should you not be getting more help from other Islamic countries nearby?
I mean, the other Islamic countries did not occupy Afghanistan. It was Britain and America and NATO who went to Afghanistan.
I know, but as of today, it is a mess, and the West is culpable, no doubt.
It's a mess,
but now, who do you go to for help?
Now, imagine if I destroy your house. Do you not think that I will go to prison and I will be held responsible? Britain came to Afghanistan, NATO, America, and other countries. We were used as a pawns against the Soviet Union. We fought a Cold War where we lost nearly 2 million Afghans. We were abandoned. And I have the exact words of Tony Blair. Let me tell you this, the exact words of Tony Blair. When he told me in his reply to my letter that this time we will, after 9/11, he told me that this time we will not abandon the Afghans and we will stand by you. And this is how you stand with the Afghans running away 3 o'clock in the morning, abandoning women and children who stand with you.
OK, Mohammed, thank you very much. You are the director of the Afghan Human Rights Foundation. Mohammed Asif, thank you for your time this morning.